I sat with each of those 11 direct reports and I said to them, okay, how do we improve your productivity? How do we improve your quality? All these KPIs that are the expectations for you in your role, how do we make them better? Well, if people just did this, if we could get people to this, if we could, it just was a common theme. Like the people aren't doing what we want, or we can't meet productivity because we're constantly training. And so okay, well, if we don't have to train people, think of all the time that frees up for us. Or if if you're measured on KPIs, and when you really sit down and you think about how do I get to those KPIs, it's through the people. You can say anything, but ultimately it's through the people that are doing the work that you're going to either make or break those KPIs.
Welcome back to the Frontline Leadership Podcast, where we help frontline leaders become professional leaders who transform their business bottom lines in the process. I'm your host, Craig Coyle, former Apache helicopter pilot, aerospace leader, and founder of Operation Lead. My guest for today's episode inherited a mess. 9 facilities, 120 frontline leaders, supervisors, shift managers, team leads, 750 employees, and a turnover rate at 130%. Within 1 year, she dropped that turnover to under 40% and transformed the operation into a high-performance engine supporting $1.6 billion in revenue. She did by making a decision that most organizations haven't made. She stopped treating frontline leaders like tactical managers, and she started developing them as actual leaders. And she did it all as a woman leading primarily in a male-dominated industry in a traditional manufacturing environment. If you don't think those details matter, well, they do. It shaped how she led, and it shaped how she brought about the impact and change that we talked about today. She's the former director of North American distribution operations for a Fortune 500 manufacturer, and she came with the receipts. Here's my conversation with Melissa Blinderman. Welcome to the Frontline Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you.
I'm so excited to have you on today so we can talk back and forth. Everything we've talked about up to this point on the Frontline Leadership Podcast is what I like to call the science behind leadership. Like, how do we design things not only to develop leaders, but to give them the tools to act out that leadership each and every day? And you've not only lived this in your career, in yourself, in your own development, and figuring out how to apply that as the leader that you've grown into, but you've figured out how to do that at scale with the leaders that are working for you as well. So why don't you tell our audience, the listeners who are mostly in the manufacturing world, but we do have some healthcare listeners, we have some other industries listening to us too. Why don't you give us a little background behind the story that we connected over?
Yeah. So I was asked, first of all, my background is in finance. So I was in the finance realm, and I was asked by a company that I worked for to move into their director of distribution operations. So their warehousing operations for their aftermarket parts business, critical business, high pressure, things have to get out on time. There's people waiting on those parts, etc. And so I was asked to take that over and was really excited about the opportunity to do something different. But I did have some exposure to the team before, so I knew there were definitely some challenges going into it.
Right.
But just like we talked about, I went into a team that had 130% turnover at the hourly level. We were bringing in people faster than they, we couldn't bring in people fast enough, I guess is the way to say it.
That's crazy.
So
Yeah,
huge turnover rates, which means, performance was lacking, quality was a problem, costs were through the roof, and really just a disengaged team that just wasn't working. So I came into that organization and was asked to help turn it around and make sure that we could meet all those metrics that a large corporation is looking for.
At a different level, but had a similar personal experience too. When I deployed to Iraq back in 2021, I deployed and I was asked to take over an organization that was really struggling. And just before I took over, I've told this story on the podcast before, but the organization was actually deemed 90% toxic in a culture survey. And these are, surveys every time a key leader transitions out have to take. And, like like you were saying, like you kind of know that there are some challenges going in, but then once you're there, you kind of have to really figure out, okay, what's the root cause? Like, what's actually going on here? Like, is
Mhm.
it that we're just not trained? Is it that there are the wrong people in the wrong seats? Like, because especially in manufacturing, and you've probably experienced this too, you've probably even seen it from the finance side of things. It's so easy for us to say, oh, it's a quality problem, or it's a production problem, or, it's a CI problem, right? We're just not creating the improvements that our project initiatives and our risk register and all this kind of stuff says is going to happen. So I'm curious, when you walked into this role, right? Were you able to immediately have this intuitive feeling like, oh, this is a leadership problem, and not just a leadership problem, but it's a leader development problem? Or did it take some investigative work for you to start kind of linking all of these, we'll call it symptoms, together to what you eventually found out was a root cause of, well, our leadership, specifically at the front lines, was really not adequately trained to do what we needed them to do?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, I was able to pretty quickly recognize that it was a leadership issue. There were a lot of great people in the organization. They were doing a lot of work, and they were working really hard to get things done, but there just wasn't a connection anywhere. And so when I first started,
Okay.
I would walk the floor, and when I would walk the
Mm,
floor, no one would look me in the eye. Like, they wouldn't look at me. They wouldn't anything.
yeah.
I try to make eye contact. I try to give them a smile, maybe say hi, and they'd be like, right? Like, don't look at me, let me, leave me alone. And the other thing that was a pretty clear indication to me that there was no true leadership happening was it was chaos. It was constant fighting every fire every day, just pure
Yep.
chaos. So this gave me a clear indication that we had no strategy, we weren't giving clear direction, we didn't have a team that was engaged. And so it was pretty easy for me to recognize that there was a leadership issue. I also had the
Yeah.
issue with the turnover rate. I mean, if turnover rates at that level aren't a clear indication that you have some type of a leadership problem, I mean, it was pretty glaring. But the issue that I had was I had facility leaders pointing to HR recruiting saying the recruiting's terrible. And I'm like, recruiting's not the problem. They're bringing us all kinds of people. They're bringing in people every week. We're getting groups of new people. None of them are staying here. So maybe a few of
Yeah.
those people were bad hires, but there's no way at this level of turnover that these are all bad hires. We got to look at ourselves. What are we not doing? Why do they not want to stay here? And so that was a pretty clear indication that we had a leadership challenge.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit, because I saw similar things happening in the aerospace industry, right? And it's interesting because you're not just losing people to competitors, you're losing people to, anybody that's in this general same pay distribution range,
Yeah.
regardless of what industry it is. Like, we were losing people to Amazon, and this
Mhm.
was a highly specialized composites manufacturing facility. So I'm curious, like, you're realizing these things, right? But clearly a lot of other people, peers of yours at the senior leader level of the organization, aren't seeing it. So how do you go about leading your peers to get on the same page so that then you all collectively, as a senior leadership, as an executive leadership team, can start charting out a strategy to effectively impact this?
Yeah, I think it's tough. To make it even more difficult in my exact situation, the leader that was my leader, my VP, had actually been in my position before. So
Mm,
ultimately, he was part of the challenge, right? And
yeah,
now I'm coming in and I'm saying, we have to do something different. This is a people problem. And so I think I had a couple things going for me. One, we had a culture change happening in the broader organization. So that helped because there was general discussions happening on culture within the
good.
organization. But
Yeah,
also, I think oftentimes we wait for the permission to do what we know we should be doing, or we try to get alignment with everyone when, especially at the scale that I was at, as you said, it was a large organization. I had 120 salaries through the salary individuals, and then about, any given time, anywhere from 750 to 850 hourly employees. It's a big team.
yeah,
I don't need
yeah,
everybody else to get on board. We can do this by ourselves
yeah.
and make a big impact in people's lives, even if we just do it within our constraints of our organization, right? And so I think oftentimes if we start leading and we start doing in the way
Mm.
that we know is right, or in the way that we can, can see a path forward, people start to see results, then they come on. Because eventually people were coming to me and saying, "Oh my gosh, what have you done over there? What are your secrets?"
Yeah.
HR came to me one day and asked me, "Can you make a list of all the things that make you a really good leader?" And I was like, yeah, I guess, but I kind of just do what I think is right. And so it's kind of hard for me to put that list together a little bit too, right? So if
Yeah.
you just kind of do it and can be effective at it, people will see. And then I mean, that's how you get buy-in, right? Is living it,
Yeah.
doing it, and people seeing the results from it.
That resonates so much for me because, once we were able to, like the company I was sharing a story about, once we were able to kind of turn things around and become a little bit more of a healthy organization, if you will, one of the things that I kept telling my soldiers that like I wanted them to feel and be a part of, like, yes, we had like a mission, right? A formal army mission we had to go about doing, but the big rallying, I would say, like, uh, less formal mission that we started to kind of band around was like, we can make this organization so effective and healthy. And it's not only an example for everybody that's in this organization forever they then next go in the military, it's an example for the organizations to our left and our right. And
Yes.
so it really doesn't matter what's going on around us because actually what happened when we got back from deployment, our battalion commander switched out. And we went from one of the best leaders I've worked for in the Army to one of arguably the not so best. And that
Yeah.
kind of became like our rallying point is like, look, we may not be in the best greater organization right now, but that doesn't mean we can't still have a positive impact. And honestly, it kind of lets your light shine even brighter than if
Yes.
it's kind of bright all around you. So I, I mean, I think that's so awesome that, I mean, you're leading your peers, not by what you say, by what you're actually doing, and I think that's 90% of the battle sometimes in
Yeah.
leadership. So that's awesome. So before we get into how you went about creating this change in terms of, engagement, in terms of retention, in terms of how that was impacting your organization from a production efficiency and quality standpoint, like how did you quantify or qualify what these challenges were actually costing your organization? Because I imagine when you wanted to start implementing some serious policies, you had to have a foot or a reason for how you were spending your time, and you had to quantify why you wanted to do these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, I think that it's really hard, right?
Yeah.
If you're implementing a new piece of system or a new, sales tool or some of those things, it's much easier to come up with an ROI that people can actually see and trace into, some financials. When you're talking about changing engagement, changing how people lead, it's much harder to truly quantify the
Right.
value of what you're doing. And
Right.
so the way we looked at it was, let's look at the cost of doing this, right?
Mm.
And there may not even be like direct costs that I can point to in a line in the P&L, and there isn't, but you've got turnover, which we know costs us to do the recruiting, costs us to do the training when we bring someone new in, cost us in productivity and quality issues when we first, on that ramp up period. So you've got some clear indicators there that there is cost within your organization
Yeah.
associated with disengagement. We also had a very, I'll almost say a fear culture, because the culture had been a really leadership culture had been authoritative, commanding,
Yeah.
and controlling type leadership. So now people are afraid to make decisions. There's bottlenecks constantly within the organization. No one feels ownership of anything, so they're not fixing things. So everybody can tell you there's problems, but nobody wants to take ownership of it because they're waiting for somebody to tell them what to do. So
Yeah.
while you can't ever, you can't specifically say, I'm going to go fix my leaders. I'm going to remove this fear culture. I'm going to create a more collaborative culture. I'm going to do these things. And you're going to directly be able to like remove these costs. It doesn't really work. But
Mm.
if you sit down and think about it, it's really obvious that there's costs there. And you kind of have to kind of have to trust, I guess, a little bit that if
Yeah.
you go and do it, the results will come. And they do. They do. They 100% do. My
Yeah.
productivity improved, my quality improved, my safety improved, all of these things improved, but you got to trust that it's going to happen if you go in on something like this,
Yeah,
right?
it's such I mean, they're all connected to each other. Like, I like to talk in terms of lead and lag, and I know a lot of
Yeah.
people understand those concepts. We've talked about them on the podcast before, but what I think the conversation about lead and lag that people typically don't ever get to is there may be a singular lead lag relationship. Let's use, we'll call it, retention, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you have a high retention, then there's a good chance that that retention is going to lead to a higher productivity. And I call that a singular lead lag relationship. But that doesn't mean that exists in isolation, right?
Right.
Because production efficiency probably is a lead to something else. And retention is probably a lag to something other. And so you can see this whole chain of lead lag going on. And so I love that you share that and yeah, just talked about like you have to believe that this is going to work. You
Yeah.
either believe it's going to work and you have faith in it and you operate out of abundance and faith in understanding that when you invest at the right level it's going to have its impact, or you have fear and you stay in that fear for however long you exist. I'm curious,
Yeah.
what would
I
you say to the people that in the
just
midst of all these challenges, right?
Yeah.
Say, well, we don't have time to do anything. We're already missing our numbers. Like we don't
Yeah.
have time to do stuff that's not directly related to getting our product out the door.
Yeah. So, and even kind of building on what we were just talking about, we talk about not having time, but when I sat with I had 11 direct reports, right? So 11
Mm,
direct reports, we had multiple layers to the organization. I sat with each of those 11 direct reports and I said to them, okay, how do we improve your productivity? How do we improve your quality? All these KPIs that are the expectations for you in your role, how do we make them better? And I just kept hearing from them. Well, if people just did this, if we could get people to this, if we could, it just was a common theme. Like the people aren't doing what we want, or we can't meet productivity because we're constantly training. And so okay, well, if we don't have to train people, think of all the time that frees up for us. Or
yeah,
if you're measured on KPIs, and when you really sit down and you think about how do I get to those KPIs, it's through the people. It doesn't, I mean, you can say anything, but ultimately it's through the people that are doing the work that you're going to either make or break those KPIs, right? And that as a leader, that is, I can guarantee every manufacturing leader in here has a set of KPIs that are in their goals for the year.
100%. Yep.
And that's what their job and their performance is going to be based on. But you can't, that's through your people. And so I then sat down and looked at and I said, okay, let's talk about these meetings that we have. Cause I just kept the same cadence of meetings that had been in there from the leader before me. And I took a look at
Yeah.
them and I was like, we talk about the metrics, we talk about this thing. But you know what we didn't talk about in any of those meetings that was never on the agenda? The people,
Yep.
right? So here I've got my leaders telling me people, 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 if we could just get the people, but we're not spending no time on the people, which is exactly what you're talking about. I need to do better
Yeah.
at this. I need to do better at this. I need to do better at this. But the way we're going to do that is through our team, but we don't have time to talk about our team. I it just, and I understand why leaders feel that way. There is that pressure and there is constantly, we got to get this product out. We got to do all this stuff, but you got to do that through the people. So you have to spend the time on the people. It just doesn't, I don't know how to make it work otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I tell leaders a lot is, a lot of people think leadership is this like nice to have soft skill. It's like the icing on the cake, right? Like it's all this fuzzy stuff that's over here, which is great, but like, we're in manufacturing and like we are a business that needs results. Like
Yep.
we have performance outcomes we have to meet. We have a business we have to grow. And my answer to that is like, yeah, that's the responsibility of a leader.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, you're getting paid to lead, to grow your team and hit your results. But there's one way to do that.
Yeah.
Well, there's multiple ways to do that, but there's really only one way to do it consistently over time for the long haul. and you hit on it. So let's just get into how you built this, right? I think everybody knows you're probably on here and you're doing what you do now because you were successful at turning this entire organization around. But let's get into the weeds. Like, how did you engineer this? Like, what resources did you use? What hypotheses, did you kind of come up with? And then how
Yeah.
did you go about building a program, whether it was informal, formal, whatever it looks like, to really start bringing about the change that the organization needed?
Yeah. So I think there's two prongs, I think this is really important, particularly when you talk about manufacturing and supply chain type organizations. We all know the saying, people
Yeah.
don't leave companies, they leave their managers, right? So if I want to improve turnover, I have to improve that leadership skills. But like I said, within the manufacturing supply chain environment, there is a really big piece of this too, that people will leave their work when what we're asking them to do in the day to day is really hard to get done. So if we don't
Mm,
have the right processes, the right support, the right pieces for them to actually, like we talk about, get that product out it's a battle every day to get that product out the door. th- They're going to be looking for other opportunities where they don't have to fight every
yeah.
day to get things done, right? So we really
Yeah.
attacked
Yeah.
both at the same time. How do we lead a team? How do we lead? But also, let's remove that operational friction that's really just grinding on people and wearing them down. And so
Yeah.
I got very intentional on what I, as a leader, was going to do. So I immediately, and I do this in every role I ever go into. So it was not new. It was something that I always do. And it honestly is so surprising to me how many leaders do not do this one simple thing. I implemented monthly one on ones with every one of my direct reports. And then I had skip level
Preach it.
conversations every
Preach it.
six every 6 months. If you do not set aside time on at least a monthly basis to talk to your direct reports, how do you know them? How do you know what they're doing? How do you know what their aspirations are? How do you know what their challenges are? Because, like we talked about, you are focused on doing what you need to do to get your product out the door. And if you don't intentionally set that time aside, you'll never have those conversations. So I really focus on getting to know them, what their challenges were, et cetera. And then I made a goal for myself in the first year to visit every one of my locations. Some of my
Wow.
locations they're small. So I had a couple really big locations, and then I had a couple, most of them were smaller. We'll say 20 people.
Right.
They've never even had anybody visit their location from outside of them. They were just out there doing their thing, right? Like getting on conference calls when they needed to, but no one had ever come to see them. And so in my first year, I committed to going and seeing each of them. In fact, put out a schedule by month. Here's where I'm coming, when I'm coming to see you. And so, and when I did that, I made sure that I dedicated time to sit with the frontline team. Come off the floor,
Yeah.
have a conversation with me, talk to me. I just want to listen. I want to hear things are going. What can we do better, etc. I also had a good opportunity when this all started in that we were creating a new corporate culture, like I kind of talked about, and somebody needed to train all the salaried staff on this new corporate culture. And I intentionally said, I'm going to be the trainer. Train me. I want to train them all. And we're going to actually bring everybody together through a series of sessions. I couldn't pull everybody in at once to do that training face to
Yeah.
face. We had the option to do it virtually, but I said, these guys are in silos. They don't have a network within our organization. We're going to bring them together. We're going to do this together. One, it tells them that it's important. And two, it allows them to start creating that network that we can lean on each other as we're going through this change, and really building a team, starting to build a team at that salaried level,
Yeah.
to really drive the change that we needed to. And then the final piece, like I said, the second piece is on the operational side. So we ended up
Yeah.
implementing continuous improvement tools. Again, another corporate initiative. They were putting in lean processes and lean tools, really focused on that. But I think the simple one and the first thing we did, and I think made a huge impact, was just area boards. Boards, big whiteboards, magnetized. We had
Yeah.
KPIs that we listed on them aligned with our 5 focus areas of customer quality, delivery, safety, and cost. And so we had a metric. Each area had a metric associated with those 5 areas, which were the corporate aligned areas that, we were aligning to. And every morning they met at that board. They could see what the results were for the previous day on each of those 5 metrics, things that they actually could impact. We used it as a chance to communicate to them. We used it as a chance to do some recognition, and we allowed them to really see what they were doing, and how it impacted the bigger picture of the organization and what they could do
Yeah.
to actually make those results improve and move the needle. So I think those were the big things that we put in place quickly that weren't difficult but made a big impact.
I love that. And it's so interesting to hear that because it parallels and fits almost exactly within the lead like a pilot framework that we've taught on this podcast. I mean, the first thing in the framework is flight school. Like you have to give leaders a foundation around what it takes to be a leader, what it takes to think like a leader, what it takes to act like a leader, just like the simple things, right? And it doesn't have to, you just need to give them a starting point. Right? Like leadership is a lifelong journey. You're never going to have it figured out, but you need to give people a place to start going. And then the second piece, and this is really where I think you had the biggest impact, and I call it pre-flight, but it's how do you manifest that in the every single day of operations? Because so often we just silo leader development into this thing that happens over here in a conference room, but it has no connection to what actually takes place in how we run our operations every single day. I tell people this all the time, the science of leadership, which 99% of people, that's the operations of leadership. The science of leadership is what makes room for the art of leadership to shine.
Yeah, I love that. Love that.
Weekly or monthly one-on-ones are the places, right? That's the science of leadership that allows for the art of leadership to shine. And the last piece is progression. A huge component of progression is getting people around each other that are
Yeah.
on this leadership journey together. And that's exactly what you did. I have no doubt that when you look at any organization that's had a successful turnaround, you see elements of those three pieces, and that those three pieces are the three pieces that every single profession uses to develop professionals.
Yep.
Period. Right? You see it in legal, you see it in medicine, you see it in aviation. So, I mean, that's so cool. So, these are kind of the pillars you used, if you will. Like, how did you actually bring it to life? Because we all know change is hard.
It is.
And that's obviously a really big challenge in leadership, especially when you're trying to bring about positive change in a culture that, probably isn't going to be too receptive to it. So, my question is, or the first part of my question is, how did you roll it out? And then tell us what happened. What happened 12 months later and what impact did it have on the organization?
Yeah. So, first of all, like I said, I was a finance person. I was not an operations person when I took this role. Um,
Yeah.
the person who was in the role before had been promoted, and so there's lots of ideas on who was going to move into this position because everybody knew somebody new was coming in. I can guarantee you, we talk about bingo cards. I was on no one's bingo card as the person they were going to bring into this role. I was definitely a dark horse. And so I knew that I knew people. I'd been at developing leaders. I'd been in had ran leadership development programs in the finance area for years, and I knew process. And so I knew that I had the value to bring, but I also had to be really upfront about who I was. And so I
Yeah.
knew that my direct reports were going to be critical to my success. They knew these operations much better than I did. And so I brought them together and started talking to them, and they were ready for change. Like, again, it was firefighting constantly. That's exhausting. I don't think they
Yeah.
knew what to do, but they knew that there was a better way. And honestly, not all of them could make it through that change. And I think that's a big thing to know. When you go through these changes, not everyone's going to be able to adapt. Not everyone is going to be there a year later. Like you just said, what happened a year? Not everyone that was on my team was there a year later because
Yeah.
either through their choice or our choice, they weren't fitting in with what we wanted to do, and they couldn't figure out how to make it work, and that just meant there was a different path for them. The other group that was like critically important to me was my HR team. They supported me not
Mm.
only in like helping to do the buy-in and drive stuff, but they also were very much my eyes on the ground, helping me see where we were having challenges or where there was a leader that was struggling but didn't have that vulnerability yet to be able to step up and say that they were,
Yeah.
asked for the help that they needed. So they could give that heads up, and we
Right.
could get that support into them. But honestly, it wasn't a rollout plan that got everybody on board. It's really how I showed up as a leader, because I can't
That's
ask
fascinating.
others to do what I'm not willing to do, right? And so the very first time I brought my team together, I told them exactly who I was. Not like where I came from, what others, but like I'm a mom and wife first. Like that's who I am. And I'm passionate about
Yeah.
people. I'm a listener. I'm going to challenge you to do things differently. I want to know who you are, not just what you can do for me. Like, I want to know who you are as a person. And I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty. I will not ask you to do anything that I am not willing to do myself. And I proved that over and over. I cleaned out aisles of cardboard boxes. I did scrap, pulling scrap from shelves and throwing it away, and making sure we got it out of the system. I helped move a warehouse. We moved a warehouse and I spent a week helping that team move that warehouse. I'm willing to do anything that I'm going to ask you to do. I
Yeah.
told them I cry easily. I'm a crier. I guarantee you are going to see me cry. And I tell you that as a leader because for years I tried to hide that about myself. I would sit in meetings where I was like frustrated or where something had happened and I was, or I'd see somebody who was upset. That makes me upset. It's just who I am. And I tried to hide that for years and years and
Yeah.
years, but I don't do that anymore. That's not, this is who I am. And so, and then I said to him, and I do not know operations the way you do. I have a lot to learn and I'm willing to do it. And I showed up and I was vulnerable, but not because I was weak, because this is who I am. And actually, I 100% believe that is what helped me unlock the potential of the team. What I see both in that experience and with other organizations that I work with is that oftentimes leaders are leading based on leadership styles that they have inherited, not actually who they are. And so they're leading in these ways that they have seen others lead and that they have historically been a part of. And they leave work and they are a totally different person outside of work than they are inside as a leader.
Yeah.
They have leadership positions in their church or in their community or their whatever, and it's completely different than how they lead in their workplace. And so I really helped give them permission to lead as who they are, and really opening up that opportunity for them. And so did I put in place like a super formal program? I did not. I think there's great value in formal programs, but also like this stuff has to be a part of it because you can't get this out of a training program. It
Sure.
has to be truly authentic. It has to be um, that level of partnership, collaboration, vulnerability, authenticity. And I think there's two things. Like if you're a
Yeah.
leader saying like, okay, I wish I could do this, but I don't know how. There's two things that I did pretty early on. I think that really helped. And they're super simple, did not cost me anything to do. One, I started sending a Monday message. It was an email. Originally just went to my 11 direct reports, but then like others started hearing about it and wanted to know. So I like ended up sending it, went to my entire salary staff where I would just share a story from my life from the week before that I could somehow correlate into a leadership trait, behavior, thought. And so, one time I was on
Right.
a run and I started thinking about when I used to run relays in high school and the baton handoff that we had to do and how much we would practice that. And I equated it to like all the handoffs that happen in our operations. Do we put down the tape that tells us when we're supposed to start that next process? How do we hand off? Bringing it back into like looking at process, and as leaders, that's our job, is to help our people hand that baton off. So whatever it could be, something simple. And then I just asked them to like think about it or act on it or do something different. Just simple, like, I'm going to sit down, type this out, and done. And it'd be just stuff that had come to me like the previous week, something coming out like, oh, I'm going to write about that on Monday. So that was really simple, didn't cost me anything, and helped me get my leadership style, my leadership thoughts, and my leadership expectations out to a broad group that were across the US and Canada that I didn't see or talk to on a daily basis. And then the other thing that I did that helped me connect with my hourly team, again, just, across multiple locations, I started recording a monthly video. So I implemented monthly all hands meetings. So everybody, once a month, pull everybody out the floor, do the communication, all the things.
Amazing.
And I would just get on Teams, start a meeting with myself and record a simple 5-minute video. I did not do 100 takes. I did maybe 3 at most, but basically it was just me talking, sharing things from them, all this stuff.
Yeah.
I always included a little safety message as part of it, what's going on in the organization, maybe some recognition, whatever the case may be. And then they showed that at their meeting. And again, because I didn't make it like super professional, super polished, I showed up authentically. I made mistakes. I stumbled over words, whatever. it really let people connect with me. And, oftentimes
Right.
I think, at that floor level, there are people, I was multiple layers up from them. We had multiple layers between me and them.
Yeah.
Um, and I was that lady who sits in an office and nobody has any idea who I am. And when I show up, it's super intimidating. And instead, they knew who I was. They knew what I looked like. They heard me talk, all of these things. And
Yeah.
it just made me a person. And in fact, there were times where some of them would reach out to me because they were really struggling with something and they knew they could. So I think there's some really easy things
Yeah.
that you can do. And I think, you know, walking the walk, talking the talk is so critical to really making the changes that need to be made.
Right. And so what started happening? Like maybe what are the first few
Yeah.
things you saw? And then what was the overall transformation of the organization? All this work you put in, right? And
Yeah.
arguably this work that was beyond the scope and responsibilities of your
Mhm.
your quote unquote title, if you will. But you were putting all this extra work in to bring about this cultural change. Like, what did it influence? What changed?
Yeah. I mean, the metric that everyone's going to hear, right? Our turnover dropped to below 40%, which is pretty aligned with industry averages. I just saw there's
Yeah.
someone out there who has a goal. She works with operations, and her goal on the HR side is to get to 96% retention rates. I was like, oh my god, that'd be amazing. But 40% turnover rates are decent. That was our quick goal,
Yeah.
our quick wins. I wouldn't say quick wins, but our first, take at getting the turnover improved. And then, I talked about like I couldn't walk through a building and have anyone look at me. They just won't look at me, right? When I started. And then
Yeah.
by the time we started this transformation, like I couldn't walk through a building without planning extra time in my schedule to get to where I needed to get because I was getting stopped
Yeah.
constantly, right? And, people were smiling and, those it's little things that told me it was working. I would walk through a warehouse and there'd be
Yeah.
like paper on the ground, like a random piece of paper on the ground, right? Because it fell, or a little chunk of cardboard that had fallen off a forklift, or who knows what, right? Just like dirt, like
Yeah.
like trash. I saw people picking it up. I would pick it up always when I go through, and then they would see me and they'd be like, "Oh, I got to pick that up," right? Like I saw people picking it up. I saw smiles on people's faces. I saw the engagement at those boards, right? One of the great things about the boards was when I started, if we missed a metric, everyone thought, "Oh my God, this is terrible. We had a red day," and I was like, "Nope, red is opportunity. What is our opportunity? What do we do to make it better?"
Yeah.
And so by the time we had got through this, when I would go do my reviews of the board, if it was all green, they knew. Didn't even have to ask. They knew, and they would say, "It's all green. We're going to make our goal higher next month." Because
Mm.
in the past, green was this good thing and we wanted everything to be green. And we turned it around and we said, green is great, but the red is even more powerful because if we miss something, that identifies an opportunity where we can go get better. If it's
Yeah.
green, I'm not trying to get better. And they knew that. And I didn't even have to tell them anymore, like, you need to up your goal because they knew they needed to up their goal. So that level of
Yeah.
engagement, that level of ownership, that level of pride in the organization. And then, like I said, all the KPIs come with it. Productivity was better, quality was better, safety was better, those turnover rates were
Yeah.
better, all of that came along with it.
It's amazing how that works, right? When you see people start to buy in, when you see them start to take ownership over things, when you see them start to really commit towards striving for excellence, you start to realize like, wow, I think people actually want to be here. Like this
Yeah,
is, and
yeah,
then like work kind of gets fun, right? And like people
yeah,
like each other and it's just, you're doing more than just improving an organization and, requisitely making more money for the
yep,
organization, but you're actually making people's lives better. And I just
exactly.
think there's nothing better and more impactful that you can be doing. So, Melissa, this conversation was awesome. Thank you for sharing your story,
Yeah.
and not just your story, but like how you went about bringing this story to life. For our listeners, how can our listeners stay in touch with you, connect with you, learn more about what you do every single day now?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way is just to connect with me on LinkedIn. I always love connections and then, getting a little chat and getting on a phone call and talking and just seeing what's going on with people and hearing their stories. I love stories. I think it's a great way to connect. And so just connect with me on LinkedIn, Melissa Blinderman, Blinderman.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Melissa. It's so great always talking with you. And yeah, looking forward to sharing this with the world.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me.
Wow. What a powerful episode. What a powerful conversation. What a powerful story. What a powerful journey. I think my biggest takeaway from what Melissa shared is just to show up as your true self as a leader. When you do that, you unlock the ability for the leaders beneath you to do the same. And that is truly what shapes great leadership. Next week, we're going to talk specifically about how to intentionally shape your communication and your junior leaders' communication to their teams. How do you do it in a way that brings people in, that activates them, and that engages them in a story? It's an episode that you're not going to want to miss. I can guarantee that. But until then, I'm Craig Coyle, and this is the Frontline Leadership Podcast. Let's lead.